glad to have you back for our closing session for the mini land grant. Again, the University of Missouri, we are appreciative of the opportunity we've had to host this conference. Should have earlier shared my thanks to our friends in Nebraska who did this last year, and I tell you, they had to do something. We had time to prepare to do this in terms of going to a virtual environment. They did it very quickly because they had planned for a face-to-face event and then had to make a pivot very quickly. So they should be given a tremendous amount of credit for paving the way for the rest of us. We had the good fortune of having a number of months, almost a year, to think about that. And I am so glad, as I said yesterday, that we decided to go to virtual, because had we had you here, we'd have had to have you wearing masks here. So, because yesterday was the first day of the mask mandate for the University of Missouri again. So, again, I just want to say thank you to all those who have been a part of this. Our team here at the University of Missouri and our MU Communications Group has done a fabulous job of pulling this together. I want to thank my colleague, Shabu Jose, for the wonderful work he's done and been a partner with me in this. The great committee we had across the region, Robin Shepard, Jeff Jacobson, and others who were so instrumental in this work. And then, of course, our hosts that have been a big part of this, H.C. Russell and Meagan Kaiser, who are our CARET delegates here at the University of Missouri, who have been just wonderful in terms of setting the stage and getting this thing going every day. So again, I'm really glad that we're back with you. I'm very excited today that we're going to have a home run hit here at the end. I asked this guy if he'd join us today, and he said he'd be delighted to. He's no stranger to those of you who work in our work every day, but I will tell you that one of the great joys I've had over the last couple of years is working with Doug Steele. Doug is no stranger, obviously a great pedigree in terms of land grant work over his history. You know, if you go back to his roots, he started out as an agent in extension, county director, extension specialist of the Texas A&M program and outreach there in Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension, as they call it now. Also served as in a number of ways at different institutions. I know he was at Montana State at one time, Colorado State, Purdue University. He's had a wonderful run and continues to have it. Now as he serves as Vice President for Food, Agriculture, and Natural Resources, which started with his APLU run in January of 2019. And Doug, it's a delight to have you with us today to bring some remarks, and then AC and I are going to join together and ask you some questions as we wrap this up today. But without further ado, I give you Dr. Doug Steele.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Stewart. Always a pleasure to join you. HC, great to see you. Looking good today behind the desk. You look like a natural back there. Maybe a career in TV or radio's in front of you. What a pleasure to join you. I want to first start by apologizing to the previous panelists. I kind of felt like I Zoom bombed you. I was telling Marshall earlier I had that little bit of anxiety. Right place, right time, right link to connect, and I just jumped right in at the conclusion, but just in time to hear Ben's closing comments. And I think that's a great reminder and a challenge to all of us that we do make decisions on where we want to invest our time, our leadership, and even in our vocations. And so I thank you, Ben, reminding us of that. We're all in a position to make a big difference in leadership roles. And I think that's what we need today moving forward. I did want to start off with a quick announcement that Marshall kind of reminded me about is what is APLU going to do this fall with our annual meeting? Well, we're currently under contract to go to Philadelphia for our annual meeting. The dates will be November 14th through 16th. That's a Sunday through Tuesday. It's going to be a hybrid model. We have several concurrent sessions, 2 general sessions, 2 keynotes. We're still putting that agenda together. Excuse me, putting that agenda together. But of course, that may change with some of the current restrictions coming back with COVID and the pandemic. That we seem to not quite get away from. And in fact, when I talked to Marshall, he said, let's just talk about really what are the opportunities and challenges we've seen. And I am by no means an expert in this, but I'm in a position, I believe, where I get up every day inside the Beltway to think about what can we do to advance our land-grant universities, and where are we missing opportunities, or where do we have opportunities to help us move forward as a session. And so I think that's extremely important to think about that. As of right now, our annual conference theme is going to be the new now. I don't know about the return to normal or the new reality or what we look like after the pandemic, but I think we can all agree things are going to change. things have changed and things will be different moving forward. And we've got to be in a position to understand how to connect these dots in the work that we do and continue to establish the value of the land-grant university system. So with that, I'm going to see if I can get into my screen share here and pull up my presentation. And let's see here. Marshall, does that look okay? Excellent. I just want to spend a few minutes to talk about life after the pandemic. And before I jump right into it, let me tell you or ask you to please use the chat function if it's on, or the Q&A box. Share your ideas, post your comments, and let's see if we can use the next 30 minutes to really learn from each other before we get to the question and answer part of the presentation this afternoon. So what do the land-grant universities today look like? Are we different as we look at celebrating 150 years in some cases of our existence? I think it's the same principles of why the Morrill Act and the other corresponding acts brought us into an existence. There's just new issues that we're facing in this day and time. I think what we've seen with all the changes in society, we still are a foundational spot where you get research-based, unbiased information. And I think we've proven during the pandemic, not everybody can say that. And in fact, I never knew you can have a job as a fact checker, which is a very popular job in DC. And I don't think a lot of people have to worry about fact checking what comes out of our land-grant university systems. We got to be proud of our roots and our traditions, but we also have to know our strengths and our mission areas. And one concern I would say we need to pay attention to coming out of the pandemic is we may have greater expectations placed on us than ever before. And we got to make sure those expectations are right for what we do. For the people we've hired, for the research engineers we have, for the extension outreach, and for our teaching mission. We just got to be sure we are not called into areas where we have mission creep or take away from the central part of what we do really well. And I say we've got to take this as an opportunity to identify and address, are there research gaps that we've seen because of the pandemic? Are there gaps in services? And I know in many cases, extension had to set up hotspots within your communities, provide information in other ways in face-to-face meetings. Is that something we need to anticipate moving forward in the future? And then how do we transfer knowledge and how do we facilitate change? And I would argue that the extension, the land-grant university system research are probably some of the biggest change agents that we have seen. People look at us, they see agriculture, they see maybe a throwback to the past, they don't understand the cutting edge work that we're doing today that is impacting their daily lives. And we got to be passionate and stay passionate. I don't know about you, but there have been times during this pandemic when I have just been totally worn out. I have been Zoomed to death. I'm ready to disconnect. It's always hard to get excited when you can't see people face to face. You're visiting me in my office, home office in Bowie, Maryland. I was very fortunate to have a dedicated home office space. Many of us have not had that. We're at kitchen tables, we're in the corner, we're in bedrooms, and we've tried to make the best of a difficult remote working situation. But we have got to really keep our passion, keep our enthusiasm, keep our commitment moving forward to help us do the jobs that we're being called to do. So Marshall said, where do you see the opportunities? And I see opportunities when I read the newspaper or listen to the news or get on my social media sites. So what's in the news? To me, this is going to frame our opportunities of the future. Climate in this administration under this Secretary of Agriculture are talked about almost every day. And in fact, it was interesting. We had Secretary Vilsack speak at our virtual conference on Earth Day. And I was Googling him and I found a speech that he gave in 1987, his first go around as secretary, when he talked about climate change at that point in time. And so here we are, we're still talking about the same concerns and we're still talking about how do we address them and how do we mitigate them moving forward. Sustainability is all across our country and the world. And in fact, I've never seen a world population talk about or be concerned about our food supply, the food supply chain, the safety and security of our food like we have in the past 18 months. So how do we as land-grant universities take that as an opportunity to continue to put a focus on our wonderful farmers, ranchers, foresters, producers that really keep our country running and shine a spotlight on the work that they're doing. Ag innovation and technology is going to be huge moving forward. Ag profitability the disruptive learning environment for children, I don't think that's going to go away just because we think the kids are going to go back to school this fall in mask or without mask. I think there's huge opportunities for 4-H youth development. Then family health and well-being, mental health, nutrition, communities, what are we doing with broadband infrastructure, healthcare, and then leadership development? How do we grow out of this having a stronger, resilient young people that are going to take on the reins of this post-pandemic world? The other thing I look at when I think about where are our opportunities and where could potential organizational change take place, this is from the website of NIFA, National Institute for Food and Agriculture, our greatest federal partner. NIFA has about a $1.9 billion budget, and a little bit over $1.2 billion of that dollars come directly to our land-grant university system in capacity and competitive funds. And so when NIFA started in 2008 out of the Farm Bill, out of the old CSRES, that really was to help us make an impact in food, natural resources, human sciences. In fact, the vision in 2008 was that NIFA would have similar standing to the National Institute of Health or the National Science Foundation. Well, obviously, we're not there yet. But if we're looking for opportunities in the future out of one of our major federal funding agencies, this is what they say it's important to them. Competitiveness of our ag program. What can we do to increase and support the U.S. economy? How do we enhance the safety of our food supply, improve nutrition and well-being of our citizens, sustain our natural resource, the environment, build energy independence, and in partnership with other areas, how do we serve as a contributor to the science, policy, and decision-making that takes place across all of federal government? So if you want to look at opportunities, you want to look for the future, you want to look at where we should be as land-grant universities, we need to pay attention to these objectives that are coming out of NIFA. And if you look at USDA specifically, every time I've heard Secretary Vilsack speak, he's always talked about competitiveness of agriculture, climate resiliency, diversity, equity, inclusion, and how are we going to make sure that we keep our producers in business through ag profitability. Those are the continuing threads that I hear out of the federal government. Those are the opportunities coming out of the pandemic we need to reposition to take advantage of moving forward. And in fact, just 2 weeks ago, I had an interesting conversation with the National Science Foundation that wanted to talk about what is the role of agricultural research in addressing climate change. And they said we need this in a global perspective, not specifically related to agriculture or food supply chain. You got NIFA and USDA to do that. What happens outside of that zone that is something the National Science Foundation may want to invest in? I've been in this position in 3 years, and I've never yet had a call from National Science Foundation to talk about potential opportunities for our land-grant universities like I did 2 weeks ago. And then finally, I spend a lot of time getting up every morning and trying to understand what the legislation and administrative priorities are. And these are just 6 of the acts that came out in the last 6 months under the Biden administration. And obviously, some of them are more focused on supplemental spending to address what has happened through COVID. But some of these, like the Growing Climate Solutions Act, is a retread that had been out before that has come back around. And I believe my job is to do what you may not have time to do in your daily activities. That's to look at these acts, where they're coming from, what's the language behind them, and then how we can connect the role of the land-grant university and look at many of these issues. This last year, we decided to join the Food and Ag Climate Alliance, a very unique alliance of, in many cases, nonprofit agencies that have polar opposite values of climate, the impact of climate and climate change. But we decided if we can come together and build off a core common ground, we can have more opportunity to influence legislature. And as I served on that committee, what I found out is there's a lot of people really smart with regulations and policies. There weren't that many people talking about, we don't have the basic agricultural research needed to be successful when you talk about a climate reduction act, or talk about soil carbon sequestration or soil health. There's a lot of basic research that has to be done, and there's still a lot of adoption of that technology through extension that has to be done. And it was interesting to me to move folks away from just the policies and regulations into, do we have the research and outreach necessary to be successful to address many of the great ideas that are being talked about without full understanding, do we have the capacity right now to do that? And many of you know that we have our ag research infrastructure proposal. We're still trying to gain steam with that. And we're trying to help convince people that without the appropriate and necessary funding for our infrastructure in agricultural labs and equipment, and even in our agricultural fields, we cannot do the kind of state-of-the-art cutting technology research that needs to happen to be successful in many of these areas. And the last thing I like to look at, HC and Marshall, is what does the world scene look like? And I promise you, and I understand that many of us don't buy into the sustainability goals that come out of the United Nations, but it gains traction because this is one focal point that brings these goals to the national venue. And if I look at these goals here, I think you could probably arguably circle all 17 of them that we play a role in our land-grant university system. But obviously the ones I circle are ones that we've looked at pre-pandemic, and now we can probably circle affordable and clean energy, reduced inequities, gender equality, even quality education. I could make a strong argument that everything on these sustainable goals are important, not only for the world community, but also for the work that we do as land-grant universities. And so whether we believe in the United Nations and their philosophies and the reports that come out of there, we need to understand that a lot of countries are looking at these sustainability goals as targets to help us move forward. And I think it only makes sense that our land-grant university system also looks at these and are aware of what these goals look like. So how do you take that? How do you take kind of the national structure of what's in the news every day, USDA and NIFA and the worldview, and design a future moving forward for our land-grant universities? Well, one, as I said earlier, let's just make sure we stay true to our core mission, but let's revisit our goals to make sure we have good targets moving forward. And now, like no other time in history, we're going to be called to really show what our outcomes look like. And the other thing I'd be concerned with, Marshall, is have we now created new expectations about moving forward? Will people now expect that we're available 24/7? They can go to a library and download, that they can find a program for after-school program for kids on the website, easily accessible. Are they going to expect hybrid meetings? Not within the next 6 months, but the next 6 years. Is that a new expectations we have set? And I will promise you, I'm not the smartest person in the room when it comes to these conversations, but we talk about the land-grant university system and bring us all together. We've got a lot of smart people that can talk about what that next stage is going to look like and what is the role of land-grant universities to help the United States and our citizens be successful moving forward. The middle one, I know Marshall and I have talked a lot about. How do we maintain our capability to provide quick action and be more responsive, get ahead of the curve when we can be, or at least stay even? We have new rapid changes in this environment we're going to move out of the pandemic and into. I know that in many cases we move way too slow, but also know as we look at some of the great stories coming out of the pandemic, the role that research and extension played because they had capacity funding and they're able to, what is the new term, of pivot quickly. I think we created a lot of additional hardships from taking place because of what we did through capacity funding. It's our responsibility, it's my responsibility to capture that messaging and make sure we talk about capacity fundings in the years to come. They understand what federal investments in capacity funding does to meet these emerging trends that we see within our communities. And finally, I think it's a great time to focus back again on the tripartite funding of extension with local, state, and federal funding. That leverage has made us really the envy of most of the world when it comes to outreach, research, and extension. And so where's this opportunity we have to strengthen our brand value? What does it mean to be a land-grant university? And what are the expectations that we have moving forward? So let me identify what I see as areas of opportunity and beyond that we need to focus on. Many of these I've talked to you about already, but I think none of these are going away. All of these are areas we're probably doing programming in right now, but they're areas that I think we need to be more focused on. We need to set clear objectives in what we're trying to accomplish. And if, once again, you pay attention to what's being talked about in the news today, you know, regenerative agriculture, the green economy, all of these things come into play with the language that we use moving forward, because we need to speak with a language that people understand. But I'll never forget one of my last face-to-face meetings in Chicago was the Trust in Food Conference. And we had a person involved in production agriculture made a statement that has always just stuck with me. And he said, you can't expect us to operate in the green if our budgets are in the red. And so we've got some big challenges in front of us. And I think it's going to be the LandGrant University through research, extension, and teaching that steps up and tries to find the cost point where we can make these kind of changes that does not bankrupt the producer, or where the producer is expected to make all of the financial investments to address greenhouse gases, carbon in the air, carbon dioxide problems, and cover crops and the things that go with transitioning your practices to what would be concerned, I guess, would deem to be more conservation friendly. I will always say and continue to say, I think that our farmers, ranchers, and foresters are probably the original conservationists, and if they're not sustainable today, they won't be in business tomorrow. So I think we need to reclaim some of that language that people have taken away from us and twisted the meaning of what it really means. And I want to leave with you with a somewhat of a long quote, but I think it really talks about where we're trying to get to today and what we're going to look like when we get to the end of this. What happens if we have farmers and ranchers that are recognized for their contributions that they already have to address and mitigate climate change? What happens when our producers have access to new seeds, animal breeds, can adapt to local conditions, and are resilient to changing conditions where people do not go hungry? What happens when we think about high quality water and new options for watershed management through the use of technology that helps alter the geography of the water source resources that we have today? What happens when we advance technology for production, processing, and foodborne pathogen detection? What happens when we improve children's diets and nutrition by slashing long-term healthcare costs? What happens when educational programming and outreach to families improve nutritional choices, support healthy lifestyles, strengthen childhood developments, and even promotes financial security? What happens when young people have positive environments for growth, professional development, personal development, and skill exploration? And finally, what happens when our rural communities are vibrant, thriving, and economic drivers for the state? Well, I'd propose to you what happens is that we have a land-grant university system that has addressed the needs of today, but is also prepared for the needs of tomorrow. And our tripartite mission of research, education, extension is not antiquated. It's probably needed as much more now than it has any time in our history, but it's up to us to articulate what that means, to reinforce what our mission mandate areas are, and to introduce a whole new population into land-grant universities and what we do. So with that, Marshall, I'm going to stop, and we'll get back to questions and answers. And I can't see a chat box, so I don't know what's going on out there in the Zoom land.
Yeah, they'll be feeding those questions to us, Doug. You're on two different platforms. You're on a platform and they're on a different one. So we'll be feeding some questions to you as we go along. But let me start with at the end. You use this statement, and I wrote it down here: addressing the needs of today, prepared for the needs of tomorrow. And that's how you've described the LandGrant University. And as you think about that, you know, there's a lot of people who go back and look at the history of the land grant. I thought I'd start there because we've got so many people that are participating in this program. Obviously, they're interested in the land grant, that mini land grant. That's what this is. As you think about the land grant, though, and what it did across history to create basically a middle class in this country, to bring people from subsistence farming into farming being a business that could literally be an enterprise for people to grow out of. And you think about the work that was done across rural America and how it brought productivity. As you look forward over that horizon, do you feel like that it's still relevant today? And I know the answer to that, but tell me why it's relevant today, or maybe even more important today as we go forward, that we have this thing called the land grant idea in our hearts and our minds and in our culture and what we want to do in the future.
You know, Marshall, I spent a lot of time thinking about that because, you know, that is our future. And what do we look like, not just 6 months from now, but 6 years from now? And I think, one, we have really got to do a better job communicating the types of students we're recruiting, we're educating, we're sending out in the workforce. I know when I was leaving Texas A&M, one of our greatest recruitment areas was Houston, Texas. And in fact, I saw an interesting article the other day on one of the social media sites about, please quit judging these young people that are coming into agricultural careers by, did you grow up on a farm? Did you grow up in a rural area? Many of them have not. Many of them were drawn into agriculture because of opportunities maybe in the green industry or opportunities they saw in local and sustainable production, or because they want to make a difference in the food supply chain. So I think we need to articulate who the quality of our students today, and more importantly, what they're going to do when they get education through our land-grant university system. I think in the way of research, we have for so long have said we'll get by with what we have, and we've really reached a breaking point with the ag research infrastructure. We've got to have major investments at the federal and state level to do the kind of research needed to move us forward. But also remind folks also, if we're going to have a long-term genetic breeding program in crops or in livestock, that funding can't run out 1 year and you lose 20 years worth of research. So I think it's important for us to think about long-term, how does the general public understand the value of agricultural research and what ends up on their dinner table at night? And that's going to be a very important message. And I think one of the greatest challenges and opportunities for extension moving forward is not just the translation of knowledge, it's the adoption, especially when you look at the ag community. A lot of the basic research has already been done and accomplished when you talk about sustainability or greater stewardship. It's convincing producers to adopt it in a way that's economically feasible. And I can almost see us going back to the day and time where we have result demonstrations out on producers' lands to, provide them a safety net if it doesn't work out. But we can't keep going around there and telling producers they need to go ahead and start using cover crops today when it may be 4 or 5 years before it's economically viable to use cover crops in their practices. And so I think that's an important one. And I know HC every day makes decisions on funding and ag funding. And, we got to help producers be in a position where they're going to be successful. And we've done that, but we got to be really intentional moving forward and making sure people see that's a role that we have in land-grant universities.
HC?
Well, thanks, Doug. Your comment about making economic decisions based on what we know and what we have a long enough track record to fund is absolutely valid. In the ag industry where I am, I've heard some of our staff agronomists say cover crops are not magic. They can help and there's a way, but you need to know how to do it and go in with the stuff that's already been proven, unless you can afford to be the research farm yourself. So there again, our staff agronomists talking to our independent producers, stressing the need to go back to the critical research that we're engaged in. Where I want to take you on a bit of a tangent, if I could, though. I love your phrase. I've used the new normal before. I like your phrase, the new now, better. I'm not sure I'm up to the task, but I like it a lot better. Coming from the advocate's perspective, you've been in this system at multiple levels, at multiple institutions in a long time. You have a long track record of this, and you've had interaction with the advocates at many of those steps along the way. I'm looking for a little help, if you could. Can you give us an example or a suggestion that maybe we don't normally see where an advocate made a difference in whether it be a local program you're working on or something at an administrative level? It could be something like needs assessment, could be a communication link that an advocate was able to make work at a local level, or transferring credibility to bringing in the specialist and somebody being able to transfer a little credibility to her so the audience responded to them better, or help create a relationship. Just, do you have some way that maybe you didn't see coming, or maybe you saw and it worked real well that you could share with us?
That's one of those questions you got to step back and really kind of evaluate at what level you're trying to make a difference. We've just gone through a process to hire a new assistant vice president of communications and external partnerships. And during that process, we surveyed internal and external. We surveyed CARET delegates and member institutions and said, what do you want us to see in communications and marketing? And they thought that at our level, what we do on the federal level is we need communications and marketing that will result in greater federal resources coming to land-grant university. So it's advocacy. They said very clearly, you need to focus on advocacy, because if you look at the University of Nebraska, the University of Missouri, Lincoln University, you already have that reputation and profile at the state level. And hopefully through your county office, you have a reputation at the county level. What we're trying to do on the national level is show it's not just the individual institutions, it's having this national network of land-grant universities that can address all sorts of societal problems and issues in geographical areas that make sense for where our universities are located. And HC, we've talked a lot about what is the role of CARET in helping with this messaging, and we are really trying to refine what that looks like. How can we be more effective in it? And in most cases, your university does not want us to try to increase their profile because they have that. They want us to increase the funding opportunities that are made available to them. I'm at least 3 steps, if not more, removed from what happens at the county office. But I know what happens at the county office is based on trust, it's based on relationships, it's based on a longstanding history between that county office and the county commissioners and the constituents in that county. I know when you get to the state level, your land-grant university has very unique and strong relationships with state government. And my goal is to take what happens at the county and happens at the state and replicate that at the national level, so that when we have great needs like the ag infrastructure, that we have congressmen and senators that are prepared to step forward and try to help us get funding we need to continue our work.
Great,
Doug, you've touched on this a couple times, and I know it's on all of our minds, this ag infrastructure issue with our agricultural research enterprises at the state and federal level. Also, I know that as we are now in 2021, we're launching into the 2023 Farm Bill. I think it'd be good to give our folks a good overview of where those processes are. I think CARET reps would really enjoy that and appreciate hearing it from where you sit. Where do you think we are, and what can they do to be a bigger part of that process?
I would say my biggest maybe frustration or disappointment right now is the partisan politics are overriding everything that happens in DC right now in federal government. And when I came to this role 3 years ago, we had Senator Stabenow in Michigan and Senator Roberts in Kansas, a Democrat and a Republican. And the one thing their staff told me is both those senators believe that agriculture should be the one bipartisan topic area that the whole country should be able to get behind. And I'm afraid we have a country that is not literally informed enough what agriculture does across this country by having safe, secure food on your table every night, or availability of that. Now, do we have problems? Yes, we have problems with hunger. We have problems with food deserts. We have a lot of problems, but if you're in an environment like we are now, when you are not encouraged to cross the aisle, when you're not encouraged to compromise, when you're not encouraged to have conversations, it makes it a whole lot more difficult moving forward. We just now had some of the infrastructure package come out, and the Senate's going to start looking at it. It did not mention ag research infrastructure specifically, so we are still trying to work behind the scenes and get that put into play. And we've had some great congressmen and senators come forward to try to help us achieve this, but this has been a very difficult, almost toxic environment to work within because of the mean-spirited nature of how politics are playing out at this point in time.
And if I can go a little deeper in that, Doug, just to clarify, from what I've heard and have conversations with you, a lot of people really say they're for it, but they can't cross that line because of partisan issues. So it's not a matter of whether people in policy positions agree that it's needed, it's the fact that the partisan lines are separating them or keeping them from doing that. Is that a correct analysis?
I think it's not only correct, it's very accurate. And I'm concerned that the next big move may be passing a budget under reconciliation, where you don't have to worry about anything about bipartisan politics. And I think if that goes through, it's going to making a very difficult 3 years in this administration. And I'm not saying right or wrong, I'm just saying this is the reality we're at today. And I think Marshall is chair of the Committee on Legislation and Policy. I think that Farm Bill Committee is going to have their work cut out to find common ground that people can agree to and support moving forward.
Thanks for the encouragement, Doug. I look forward to that next 2 years of my life. Well, let me ask this question. I know you mentioned this earlier, and then I want to go back to HC for another question. But you talked about new coalitions, new partnerships, new collaborations. Sort of unpeel that a little more. I think folks would really be interested in some of the work you're doing in that space. I think that's really been a step forward in your role and the work of the area that you're working in.
You bet. You know what I've learned coming up here is I would like our what we do at the national office to mirror what happens at your state office. And there's a lot of national associations up here for whatever reason we have grown apart from. Could be changing leadership, could be changing priorities, but when we started the work on the ag research infrastructure, we thought the best thing we can do is reach out to these commodity groups and national ag organizations and say, hey, this is what we're doing and we need your support. We reached out to the American Farm Bureau, we reached out to Farmers Union, we reached out to the corn folks and National Cattle and Beef Association and National Association of State Departments of Agriculture and the Tri-Societies. And every time we reached out, they said, man, it's really good to hear from the BAA and what our land-grant universities are doing. So it showed me, Marshall, that we got to go a little more time on the national area to rekindle these relationships that happen pretty easily at the state level, and they happen real easy at the county level, but a little more difficult here. And to go in to talk to the pork producers about areas of mutual concern where they talk about sustainability and regulations and policies. It's kind of exciting to be able to do that, because the one common thread I've heard from every national organization is we value the work of our land-grant universities. We value what they're doing in research, teaching, and extension. And I'm trying to model that at the national level so that we don't always come asking. Sometimes we come trying to provide our support with what's important to those associations.
HC?
Well, Doug, what I was thinking, I think you may have already covered. If you were going back in time and had a chance at a younger administrator or a younger CARET delegate, do you have a brief comment or a bit of wisdom that you'd like to impart to get us off and running?
Yeah, I don't want this to come across as negative or derogatory, but I would find out who the kingmakers are. If I went back into my very first county extension role, I probably would have asked producers or people on my advisory committee, if you wanted to influence change, if you wanted to have somebody that's got a very respected opinion, if you want somebody where people are going to listen to them, who would those people be? When I grew up in a rural area, and it's usually the pastor or the coach or your FFA teacher, it could have been a banker, but those people exist, and most of them perform a very valuable role. And even if in my young past 3 years ago, HC, when I came to DC, I wish I could have read the landscape better of who is out there that's really making big movements. American Farm Bureau is usually an easy one to identify. The beef producers usually identify. I didn't realize the poultry folks had such a strong voice up here. Another group we need to be communicating with, and very important for a lot of our land-grant universities, is to work with poultry industry. So that's what I would say, HC, no matter what level you're involved, even as a CARET, and many of the CARET delegates are appointed because you know who those people are, or you may be one of those people. But to me, moving forward, especially in today's environment, it's all about trust. And the only way you have trust is having a personal relationship with people. And so prior to Zoom, I spent a lot of time going up and down the hallways and just trying to meet staffers and committee members and influencers and get to a point where they'd recognize me maybe by face when I came down the hallway. Now I got to rebuild that. I've lost it over the last year and a half, and there's new players now. But there is nothing can be substituted for personal relationships and trust.
Well, Doug, we have just a minute or so here left, and I'd love for you to just, in summary, any closing challenge that you might have for administrators, CARET delegates, others that are participating as you look at the future of our work in the land grant system?
We have got challenges, but those challenges have so many opportunities in front of them. And when I started this role and became the Director of Extension and Vice President of Montana State, I asked somebody that I had entrusted as a confidant, how do you really influence and make change? And they said, you have to invest your resources in priority areas, which means you've got to identify priority areas because some may not be as high a priority as others. And that's a challenge. It's hard for us in land grant university system to tell anybody no, but we don't have unlimited resources. And we've got to be able to really think clearly and target where that best investment's going to be. And if I was going to look at a crystal ball, I think obviously, at least for 3 more years, if not longer, it's going to be climate resiliency, and how do we adapt to changing climate. It's going to be these great environments for our young people, and it's going to be helping people address the needs of nutrition, health, and wellness. All things that we do well, but all things that we've got to make a very tangible and focused effort with our resources to address them in a way that makes a difference.
Well, Doug, I want to thank you for being with us today as our closing speaker. We couldn't have asked for a better person and a good friend and someone that I truly know has a heart for the work you do. And just say thank you to you for all that you do, and continue to do the good work and be encouraged. We're out here pulling for you, and we're also right with you, not behind you, but right beside you in that walk. So thank you again, Doug, for being with us today.
It's certainly my pleasure. Anytime I can share the podium with you guys, it's a great honor for me.
That's a great thing. And, as I was thinking about, as we go to HC here in a second, and I was thinking about how to close this out, I'd again say appreciation to all of you who participated, to all of our speakers, presenters, all those who work behind the scenes to make this happen. But I was really thinking about something Doug said, and he talked about where influence really happens. And I reflected back as I was sitting here about when I started my career as an agriculture teacher in Eastern North Carolina. And one of the lessons that one of my mentor teachers taught me was that you need to go find out where the tables of knowledge are in your community. And he called it the TOK. He said, tables of knowledge. And I said, what is that? And he said, you go down to the local Hardee's, and you go in there about 6 o'clock in the morning. And at Hardee's in Eastern North Carolina, for those of you who don't know, that's where it was founded, was in Greenville, North Carolina, and Rocky Mount, North Carolina. The first Hardee's ever established were there. A guy named Wilbur Hardy started them. He said, you go down to the Hardee's and you'll find people eating their country ham biscuit and having their cup of coffee, and they'll be sitting around some tables. And he said, when you do that, you'll find that there's a lot of talk. He said, when you walk in there the first time as a young teacher, you will not be invited to the table of knowledge. He said, but you keep going in there, and after a while, they're going to look over you and say, young fella, who are you? And you'll introduce yourself, and if you keep going in every morning, having your cup of coffee and eating your ham biscuit, eventually they'll say, come on over here and join us. And over time, you will join the table of knowledge. And what you want to do in every community that you work in, whether you be an agriculture teacher, 4-H agent, 4-H specialist, agriculture agent, a researcher, or working in teaching and learning, or whatever your role is in the land grant system, or a CARET rep, you want to find out where the table of knowledge is, because the table of knowledge is where the influence is. And that influence resides in people. As Doug has said, it's in the relationships, it's in the local people who make a difference and continue to in this country. And I think all of us have to have a chance to pause and remind ourselves during all that we've been through in the last year, that that's what really makes community, and that's what makes this country what it is. It's what happens in that local community, like I was in this past weekend on Saturday in Texas County, Missouri, and at their county livestock exhibit and fair, and it was just an awesome opportunity to be reminded of what we do and what it means to people in their local lives every day. So with that, I'm going to go back to someone that you've gotten very familiar with, H.C. Russell, one of our CARET reps, who's going to close us out today. And again, thank you, H.C., for your leadership and all that you and your colleagues do in the North Central region to make the mini land grant and all these things we do so successful. So with that, I'll give you H.C. Russell.
Thank you, Marshall. As we wrap up here, the few things I'd like to share, a few comments. First of all, Marshall's been very deliberate in thanking all those that had a part in making this program, putting it together. The presenters were fantastic. I appreciated every one of them. Thanks for all you do. The IT professionals that work behind the scenes that put this together, I'm afraid to start naming them because I know the few that had to suffer us here locally are only the tip of the iceberg. There are more behind the scenes that make something like this work. The next thing I'd like to share, though, is it goes back to a story from a concert band. I was playing in a band, and I had a part that was the solo part, and the director got to the part where we were supposed to start in his very first rehearsal, and he cut the band off, and he turned to me and said, "Relax, it all depends on you." So what I would like to share with our faculty, I'd like to talk for a minute to our extension, agriculture, and research professionals. Our research people, our educators, our extension people, you are our feet on the ground, you are the embodiment of our mission, and you are why we are here. What you do matters, it is important, carry on, and we're going to be here to support you. But unlike the band concert, you are not alone. Us CARET delegates are here. The only reason we're here is to support what you're doing. So use us, abuse us, bring us along, tell us where you need us, tell us where we can help you. If we step out of line, nudge us back and show us what you need, bring us around, and we're going to be there to try to help. That's, again, the reason we're here. Next year, this time, our North Central LandGrant Conference is scheduled to be hosted by Ohio State University. We don't know what tomorrow brings, so I have no idea what next year will bring, but we trust our colleagues at Ohio State are going to do a fantastic job, and I'm already looking forward to the experience. To all of you, including the CARET delegates, we sure hope to see you face-to-face in D.C. at the joint meeting between the Administrative Head Section and the CARET organizations. Thank you for attending.